Hello. I remember the date, May 17th, but it held no special significance. It was not my wife's birthday or our anniversary, not even the day we first met. It was a typical Tuesday, and that was exactly why I chose it. Nothing out of the ordinary. My name is Keith, and after 12 years of marriage, things between Lisa and me had started to feel, well, predictable. It is not that I did not love her. She and our kids meant the world to me. But something had changed. That spark in her eyes, the one that would light up when I hinted at getting intimate, was gone. Completely vanished. Now, being the hopeless romantic that I am, I decided I would plan an evening she would not forget. I mean, this would be the night that reminded us of how it all started. Rekindle that fire we once had. So, on Monday, during lunch at work, I called in some backup. Katie, Cheryl, and Karen, three of the most gorgeous women at the office. All of them single and ready to give their best ideas. All right, ladies, I said, leaning over the break room table. If you could script the most romantic night of your life, what would it be? They were quick to respond, throwing around ideas of trips to Paris, gondola rides in Venice, and sunsets over the Swiss Alps. I laughed. Easy, girls. Let's bring it back down to earth. I'm talking about something local, a night at home or a fancy hotel in the city. You know, something that will not break the bank. They huddled up and, by midday, had whipped up a list of ideas that fit my budget perfectly. When I thanked them, they laughed, but I could tell they were invested. They even bet on how the night would end, telling me I had better not screw it up. The first thing I did was take Wednesday afternoon off work, so I could get everything ready while Lisa was out. Normally, I got home around 6, but Lisa was always home by 3:30 to meet the kids when they got off the school bus. The plan was simple. Tuesday night, I told her that my parents wanted to take the kids out for dinner and a show on Wednesday, so they probably would not be home until around 8 o'clock. The kids were thrilled when I added that they would spend the night at their grandparents' house, a treat for them since my folks spoiled them rotten. I left work around 11:30 on Wednesday, armed with my list. It was game time. I needed to make this night perfect. The first stop was the store, where I loaded up on everything the girls had suggested. A sweet card, Lisa's favorite chocolate, and a bottle of wine she loved. The list went on. A real recipe for romance. The florist gave me a funny look when I asked for 2 pounds of pink rose petals. That is, until I explained what I had planned. Her eyes softened. You must really love your wife to go through all this trouble, she said as she handed me the roses. You have no idea, I responded with a grin. Next, I called Lisa's favorite steakhouse and reserved a table for 8. I figured after everything, we would need to eat. If, for some reason, we decided to skip the restaurant, I even bought steaks for us to grill at home. Everything was coming together perfectly, like I had rehearsed it 100 times in my head. By 2:30, I was back at the house. I parked behind the garage to keep my car hidden and snuck everything inside. Looking at the clock, I muttered to myself, all right, Keith, you have got an hour to make this perfect. The next 60 minutes flew by in a whirlwind of preparation. I chilled the wine in the freezer, then used the rose petals to create a heart on the bed. Inside the heart, I wrote, I love you, with chocolate chips, something I knew she could not resist. In the bathroom, I ran a hot bath and sprinkled the remaining petals over the water, letting them float on the bubbles. The garden tub was a centerpiece of the evening. By the time I was done, it looked like something out of a romance movie. On her nightstand, I placed the card I had picked out and dimmed the lights for that perfect, soft glow. I was creating the mood, right down to the music. A portable CD player sat on the dresser, waiting for me to hit play the moment she walked in. Finally, I took a shower, shaved, and stripped down, deciding to go all in. I stood at the foot of the bed, naked, holding 2 glasses of wine, nerves buzzing as I waited for her to come upstairs. Everything had to be perfect. At exactly 3:25, I heard Lisa's car pull up. My heart raced. I could hear her footsteps downstairs, then up the stairs. I could not wait to see the look on her face. I held my breath as the bedroom door swung open. But instead of the romantic evening I envisioned, it all crumbled in an instant. Lisa was not alone. When the door burst open, I stood frozen. I had prepared for everything, except this. Lisa came in, laughing, her shirt half unbuttoned, her hair a mess. But it was the man following her up the stairs that made my heart stop. Rick, her boss. His face went pale the second he saw me standing there, stark naked, holding 2 glasses of wine. For a moment, everything slowed down. It was like time itself dragged out those seconds, making them unbearable. In those 4.75 seconds, my entire world collapsed. Lisa's laugh died as her brain registered what was happening. Her hand shot to her open blouse, fumbling to cover herself as her eyes met mine. In a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Oh my God." Rick, the coward, turned on his heel and bolted for the front door, his footsteps thundering down the stairs like a runaway train. He was gone in under a minute, but I did not care. My eyes stayed locked on Lisa. She stood there, her face turning white as tears welled up in her eyes. "Keith, she started, but her voice broke. I did not give her a chance to finish. I dumped the wine I had been holding onto the bed, right over the heart I had made with those rose petals. It was almost poetic, watching the petals get soaked, turning from bright red to a deep, dark stain. Without a word, I walked to the closet, grabbed a pair of jeans, and started getting dressed. The sound of Lisa sobbing behind me barely registered as I yanked my clothes on. "I'm sorry," she kept repeating between gasps. "I'm so sorry, Keith. Please, I love you. I love you." But all I could hear was the sound of her betrayal, like a broken record playing over and over in my mind. After what felt like forever, I turned to her, my voice cold and distant. "You need to leave before I come back," I said. There was no emotion, just exhaustion. I did not wait for her reply. I grabbed my car keys, walked out the front door, and drove off. The quiet hum of the engine was the only sound I could focus on as I headed to the nearest bar. Tony's, a little dive where I could drown myself in anything stronger than my thoughts. I sat at Tony's nursing my 4th beer, trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. The coldness of it slipped down my throat, numbing the sharp edges of my thoughts. But no matter how much I drank, I could not erase the image of Lisa and Rick, of what they had done, and how stupid I had been. I kept asking myself, how long? How long had this been going on right under my nose? Did I miss the signs, or had I just been too blind to see them? I thought back to the little things, the late nights at work, the extra effort Lisa had put into her appearance lately. I should have known something was up, but I wanted to believe our life, our marriage, was solid. I wanted to believe she loved me like she said she did. At 6:30, I finally forced myself to leave the bar. My head was spinning, not just from the alcohol but from the mess that was now my life. I drove back home, expecting to find Lisa still there, waiting to explain herself, to beg me to forgive her. But when I pulled into the driveway, the house was eerily quiet. Her car was gone. I walked inside, half expecting her to jump out and apologize again, but the only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I wandered through the house, unsure of what I was even looking for. When I got to our bedroom, I found everything just as I had left it: the rose petals, the wine, the card. The bathwater had gone cold, the bubbles long gone. It was like a twisted, frozen moment from another life. Lisa's closet door was wide open, several drawers pulled out and half empty. She had left in a hurry. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the mess of rose petals and wine-soaked sheets, trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I ignored it. I was not ready to talk to anyone, least of all Lisa. After a few more minutes of silence, I fished my phone out and saw that Lisa had called me more than 20 times, each time leaving a message. Without thinking, I deleted them all. I knew what I had to do next, even if it made me feel like I was moving through quicksand. The next morning, I showered, shaved, and dragged myself to work like a zombie. If I stayed home, I would have crumbled. When I got to the office, I could tell right away that the girls were waiting for details. Karen, Katie, and Cheryl practically sprinted into my office, eyes wide with anticipation. "Well, how did it go?" Karen giggled, nudging Katie. Cheryl raised an eyebrow. "Judging by the way you look, it must have been one hell of a night," she teased. I stared at them for a moment, feeling my blood start to boil. But it was not their fault. They did not know. They had no idea what had happened the night before. So I forced a bitter smile and said, "Yeah, something like that." Katie's face fell, picking up on my tone. "Wait, what happened?" I gave them the quick version, leaving out the part about standing naked in front of Rick. I kept it simple, but the moment I mentioned Lisa and her boss, their eyes widened in shock. "Holy hell," Cheryl muttered under her breath. "What are you gonna do?" I shrugged, trying to play it off, but inside, my chest was tightening. "Survive," I muttered. "Take care of my kids." They all looked at me with pity in their eyes. I could not stand it. "Listen," I said, keeping my voice low, "please don't spread this around. The last thing I need is to be the talk of the office." They nodded, offering quick apologies before they left. It was all over their faces. They felt bad for me, but I did not want their sympathy. I just wanted everything to go back to how it was before. By 9:30 that morning, I was making the calls that would officially sever the ties Lisa and I had. Bank accounts? Changed. Credit cards? Closed. For 401k? Split. I went into autopilot, making every move necessary to secure what I could before things got uglier. It was mechanical, cold, but necessary. I finally called my parents, the only people I could trust, and told them the news. They were shocked, of course, but promised to keep the kids for a few extra days. They said I needed to figure things out, and I was thankful they understood without asking too many questions. After the calls, I glanced at my phone. More messages from Lisa. I deleted them all, one after another. I was not ready to listen to her apologies, her excuses. I was not even sure if I ever would be. By mid-afternoon, I had spoken with my lawyer. He laid it out for me. Divorce would not be simple. It never is, especially when kids are involved. "Look, Keith," he said after going over my options, "you should consider cooling off for a while. Try counseling. But no matter what, you're going to be paying child support and maybe even alimony." It hit me like a ton of bricks. Even though Lisa was the one who cheated, I was the one getting screwed. She would probably get custody of the kids, the house, and a chunk of my paycheck every month. "They didn't even kiss me first," I mumbled under my breath, bitterly. My lawyer leaned back in his chair. "Maybe you should stick around for a bit. Move into the guest room. Make life easy for your kids." It was not the advice I wanted, but it was probably the right call. I left the lawyer's office feeling numb, like I had been hit by a truck. There was no winning this. Even if I got through the divorce, I would lose something. My family, my house, my time with the kids. I went straight home and moved all my stuff into the spare bedroom. If this was how it was going to be, I had to make it official. I even bought a new mattress because I could not stand the thought of sleeping on the one we had shared. The old one was dragged out to the curb without a second thought. For the next few days, I ignored all of Lisa's calls and messages. I knew she would show up sooner or later, and I needed to be ready for that conversation. By Friday afternoon, I picked up the kids from my parents and took them out for pizza. They were happy, laughing, telling me about their time with Grandma and Grandpa. They had no idea what was happening, and I did everything I could to keep it that way. I did not want to burden them with this mess. They deserved better than that. We got home around 8:30, and as soon as we walked through the door, there she was, Lisa, standing in the hallway, waiting for us. She looked like hell, her eyes puffy and red from crying, but her gaze was locked on me. The kids ran to her, hugging her, oblivious to the tension hanging in the air. I watched her carefully as she interacted with them, smiling weakly, pretending everything was fine. By 10 o'clock, they had gone off to their rooms, leaving Lisa and me alone for the first time since the whole thing blew up. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice shaky. I could tell she had been rehearsing what to say. She wanted to fix this, or at least try, but I was not in the mood. I was not ready to face her just yet. "Maybe tomorrow," I muttered, brushing past her on my way to the guest room. I closed and locked the door behind me, collapsing onto the bed. I heard her outside the door, crying softly as she moved down the hall toward what used to be our bedroom. The sounds of her pulling sheets off the bed, trying to tidy up the mess I had left behind, only made my anger rise. What was she hoping for? That she could clean up a few rose petals and it would all go away? The next morning, I noticed the remnants of that night. The rose petals, the chocolates, and the card, tossed in the trash bin, along with the empty bottle of wine. It was like someone had tried to erase the memory of that night, but I was not so lucky. The kids went off to their Saturday activities, football and hanging out with friends, leaving Lisa and me alone again. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stepped outside onto the deck, staring out at nothing. Lisa followed, her eyes swollen with fresh tears. "Keith," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You know we have to talk. You cannot avoid me forever." I sighed and leaned against the railing. "What is there to talk about, Lisa?" I shot back, feeling the anger surge again. "You cheated. How long has it been going on with Rick?" She bit her lip and looked away. "It was only the second time, I swear. Please believe me." "Second time?" I scoffed, shaking my head. "Why is it so hard to believe that? You've lost the right to call me honey or anything like that. We're coexisting for the kids now. That's it." Her face crumpled as she ran back inside, leaving me alone on the deck with nothing but my coffee and a newspaper I could not even focus on. The rage simmered in me, and I tore the paper in half out of frustration. The next 2 weeks dragged on like a bad dream. Work was hell, but it was a different kind of hell than home. At least at the office, I could bury myself in tasks, drown out my thoughts with meetings and deadlines. But at home, the silence was unbearable, even though Lisa kept trying to talk to me. And then there were the whispers at work. Someone must have let it slip about what had happened, and now, every time I walked down the hall, I could feel the stares, the pitying glances from my female coworkers, the quiet gossip behind my back. I hated it. My boss even pulled me aside one day, asking if I needed some personal time off, but I told him I was fine. "Managing," I said, though it was a lie. The kids knew something was off, too. They asked me one night if they had done something wrong. That hit me like a punch to the gut. No, not at all," I told them, trying to keep my voice steady. "Your mom and I are just going through a rough patch. It has nothing to do with you." But I could see the doubt in their eyes. Lisa, on the other hand, kept trying to fix things. She had apologized a million times by now, but it did not matter. One night, she even tried to seduce me, crawling into bed next to me in the guest room. But all I felt was anger. Her touch, once something I craved, now felt cold, like I was lying next to a stranger. I pushed her away, rolling over in silence. Then one Thursday, just before I was about to head home, Cheryl walked into my office unannounced. She took one look at me and said, "Grab your coat. We're leaving." I stared at her, confused. "What?" "No, Cheryl, This isn't a request, Keith. Get your coat. We're going out," she said firmly, cutting me off before I could make any excuses. She had that determined look in her eyes, the kind you do not argue with. So, I grabbed my coat and followed her out. When we arrived at Tony's, the same dive bar I had gone to after the whole thing exploded, I saw Katie and Karen already sitting at a table in the corner. We ordered drinks, and as soon as we sat down, Cheryl leaned in. "Keith, you need to get your head out of your ass. You've been walking around like a ghost for 2 weeks. If you don't snap out of it, you're going to lose everything." "I have my reasons," I muttered, taking a long drink. The beer tasted bitter, like everything else in my life. "Yeah, well, your reasons suck," Katie shot back, crossing her arms. "You're not talking to Lisa. You're not talking to us. What the hell do you want, Keith?" I felt my chest tighten, and I slammed the glass down on the table. "I want my life back. I want it to be like it was before all this shit happened." "Before? You mean when you said your marriage was stale and predictable?" Karen chimed in. "Come on, Keith. Do you even love her anymore?" I stared at my drink, my hands shaking. I don't know. I hate her, but I love her at the same time. I want to strangle her, and I want to kiss her, but I don't know what to do." Cheryl sighed, signaling the waiter for another round. "First, you need to level the playing field. Lisa's still living in your house, going to work every day like nothing happened. Rick, on the other hand, goes home to his wife and kids, even though he's the one who wrecked your marriage." Her words hit me hard. She was right. I was just sitting there, letting everything fall apart around me. I had to do something. By the end of that night at Tony's, I had made up my mind. I could not keep living like this. Cheryl and the others were right. I had to take control of my life, or I was going to let Lisa and Rick walk all over me. I could not just sit by and let the pieces of my marriage crumble without doing something about it. When I got home, Lisa was waiting for me. "Where were you?" she asked, her voice shaky. She had been crying again, but I was too tired to care. "What do you care?" I snapped, brushing past her as I headed for the guest room. She followed, still wiping tears from her eyes, but I did not give her the satisfaction of looking back. That next day, I met with my lawyer again. I told him I was ready to take action, not just against Lisa, but against Rick, too. "I want to hit Rick with an alienation of affection lawsuit," I told him, "and I want to sue the company they both work for. There has to be some kind of policy about a married boss sleeping with a married employee he supervises, right?" My lawyer leaned back in his chair, eyebrows raised. "It's tricky, Keith. You don't have hard evidence of an affair. They hadn't technically done anything when you caught them." I clenched my fists, feeling that familiar rage boil inside me. They were in my house. Rick had his damn shirt off and Lisa. I cut myself off, shaking my head. "It's enough for me." He sighed. "Look, you have a case, but it's going to take time. I'll start the paperwork. But you need to understand, this could get ugly. Do you really want to go down this road?" "Yes," I said, without hesitation. I was done being the one who got screwed. Serve Rick the papers, and serve the company. I want them to know I'm serious. Over the next few days, I felt like my old self again. I joked with people at work, played with the kids, and even managed to talk to Lisa without wanting to rip my hair out. It felt like a step forward, even if it was small. On Thursday, my lawyer, Randy, called me at the office. "Keith, they've been served. The company's CEO wants to meet. They're calling it cleaning up the mess, but I think they're worried." "Good," I said, my voice steady. "Set the meeting." The following Tuesday, Randy and I sat across from the CEO and his HR manager in a small conference room. The air was thick with tension as the CEO flipped through the papers we had filed. "We've reviewed everything, but there's nothing here that proves misconduct," the HR manager said, leaning back in his chair. I smirked. "That's because I haven't finished. I haven't even called my witnesses yet." I could see the doubt flash across their faces. "You really think none of the office employees knew what was going on? I bet one or two would be willing to talk. How many of your managers will risk their careers to cover for Rick?" The CEO's face went pale, and I knew I had hit a nerve. "Fine," he said through clenched teeth. "We'll talk." Randy and I stood up, ready to leave. "If you want this to go away, I'll need a settlement, $250,000 plus attorney fees. And Rick and Lisa get transferred. Far away." By Thursday, I had their answer. Randy called me at 3:30 in the afternoon. "Keith, they're offering $150,000, and they're agreeing to the transfers." I grinned, feeling the power shift in my favor. "Tell them the new price is $300,000. If they counter again, it'll go up to $400,000. The next day, Randy called again. "They caved," he said. "The company agreed to the $300,000 settlement. They want this gone, Keith. By 5 o'clock, the paperwork will be ready for you to sign." It was finally happening. Everything was falling into place, and for the first time since I had caught Lisa and Rick, I felt like I was in control. That evening, I left the office at 4:30, holding the signed documents in my hand. It felt surreal. The company was paying me to make this nightmare disappear, and they were shipping Rick and Lisa out of town, far away from me and my life. I got into my car, grinning like I had just won the lottery. On the drive home, I called Randy one last time. "Serve Rick tonight," I told him, my voice filled with a new sense of satisfaction. "Do it at his house. I want him to know I am not done with him yet." When I got home, I was in such a good mood that I surprised myself. I walked through the front door with a spring in my step and announced, "All right, everybody, grab your coats. We are going out to dinner tonight." Lisa stared at me, stunned. She had no idea what was coming, and for once, I enjoyed keeping her in the dark. "Come on, Lisa," I said with a smile. "You too." A hesitant smile crossed her face as she grabbed her coat and followed me out the door. We went to dinner, and for the first time in months, we laughed together. It almost felt like old times. I could see the hope in her eyes, but she had no clue what I had set in motion behind the scenes. When we got back home, The kids went to their rooms, thanking me for the nice evening. Lisa came closer, leaning in to kiss me on the cheek. "Thank you for tonight," she whispered. "It meant a lot to me." I nodded. "We'll talk tomorrow," I said softly, watching as she disappeared into the bedroom. The next morning, Lisa came downstairs looking anxious. She must have felt the shift, sensed something was different. She was right. Around 9 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Lisa answered, her face turning pale as she looked down at the papers being handed to her. "You knew last night, didn't you?" she demanded, her voice rising in panic. "You knew this was coming." I sipped my coffee and shrugged. Not quite, but I had a feeling. Her hands shook as she held up the transfer orders. "New Jersey? They want to send me to New Jersey?" Her voice cracked with disbelief. "Looks like your services aren't needed here anymore," I said calmly, savoring every word. "Either New Jersey or you're out of a job." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I gave them 8 years, and this is how they repay me? 20 minutes to clean out my desk, and now I'm gone." I did not respond. I was too busy enjoying this scene. "What about Rick?" I asked, leaning back in my chair. Lisa's gaze dropped to the floor. "He's being transferred to Flint, Michigan." A grin spread across my face. Flint? The armpit of the Midwest? Perfect. I leaned forward, locking eyes with Lisa as she sat down, her hands trembling. "Here is how this is going to go, Lisa. If you want to stay in this family, there are some conditions." She stared at me, her eyes wide, but she did not speak. She knew she had no choice. "First, you are going to get tested for any sexually transmitted diseases and bring me the results. I want a certificate of health. No exceptions." I watched her face pale even more as I continued. "Then, you are going to take a polygraph test. I will even give you all the questions in advance." I slid a piece of paper across the table, watching as her eyes flicked down to read the list. "The questions start off easy, but by the end, you are going to be facing the truth." Her hands began to shake as she scanned the page. Tears welled up again, spilling down her cheeks. "Am I the biological father of our kids?" she read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you cheat on me? When we had sex, were you thinking of Rick or me? How many times have you lied to me in the last few months? How many affairs have you had?" I could see her crumbling right there in front of me. "I can answer them now if you want," she stammered through her sobs. I shook my head, my voice cold. "No, Lisa. Tomorrow is the day. We will do this right." I stood up, walking away from the table. "And if you pass? We have an appointment with a marriage counselor Saturday morning." She just sat there, broken, crying into her hands. I felt no sympathy. This was the path she had chosen, and now she had to walk it. The next day came and went, and though I did not like some of her answers, she passed. Barely. But did I trust her? Not for a second. Still, for the sake of the kids, I was willing to try, at least for now. But it was not the same. We had sex once or twice a week, like we were just going through the motions. It was not making love anymore. It was mechanical, a way to release tension, but it lacked any meaning. The intimacy was gone, stolen by what had happened with Rick. Speaking of Rick, he took the transfer to Flint, Michigan last year. I have not heard much from him since, but every Christmas, I send him a card. Last year, I sent it from Florida. It said, "Glad you are not here." It is the little things that help me get through the mess he created. As for Lisa and me, well, we are still trying. It is not perfect, but it is something. I do not know if we will ever get back to where we were, but at least for now, we are coexisting, for the sake of the kids. One thing is for sure, though. If you ever find yourself in my shoes, remember this. Trust is fragile, and once it is broken, it is damn near impossible to get back. Bye.